So my name is John Olson. I have a Model 3 Performance, and one of the things that was really bothering me was I couldn't get into my car sometimes when my phone didn't work or when I left my phone someplace. So I've been following RFID implants, and it looks as if, you know, the technology got to the point where I had some faith in it. So I ordered a chip and I implanted it in my hand. I did a lot of research over the years on who could actually do implants, because I've always experimented with like a magnetic implant, but obviously, you know, there's all kinds of compatibility issues. Most of the time I would do small implants myself. But my brother actually had been a body modification person at a tattoo parlor up in Baraboo, Wisconsin. And he was looking for people who would do it. We watched a bunch of videos. We saw how some people didn't do enough research. So he studied for several months to be able to do it properly, and he installed it for me. Came down from the UP. He now lives up there, and he installed it for me. Yeah, so he does piercings and other types of like implants, studs, things like that. And so he came down from the upper Michigan to be able to install it for me. Actually, yes. Most hospitals will be a little hesitant to do anything that's not a, you know, a necessary surgery. I'm sure, you know, at some point in the future, maybe someone who does, you know, implants, you know, for, you know, enhancements, or people who like to do facial augmentations, someone like that would probably, you know, do an implant. But right now, the only people who really are interested in doing the implant you know, are essentially certain tattoo parlors that specialize in body modification. I've had the implant for 7 days, and but I purchased the implants probably about 2 months ago, and the Tesla implant came about 3 weeks ago. So they had to specially make that chip. The chip that's for Tesla is 7 millimeters by 32 millimeters, and it's only a half a millimeter thick, so it's kind of looks like a very small little dipstick. Almost an inch and a half long if you're into, you know, imperial units. The chip was kind of surprisingly large compared to the tinier RFIDs that are usually only 2 millimeters in diameter, and those are usually round, about the grain of a piece of grain of rice. But the Tesla chip requires a lot more power, so it has a big coil.
How many implants do you have?
I have 3. Actually, this is only one implant, but it has 2 separate processors. One's at 125 kilohertz, the other's at 13.5 megahertz. I had both implants done at the same time, just for convenience. Once I created a sterile environment to be able to do it, you just wanted to make sure you get it all done at once. Yes, I had my brother come to my house. We had arranged it long in advance, and he had done a lot of background work to make sure that we were prepared for it. Well, that second implant, what you can do with it is the primary use of it is that I can use it for accessing the makerspace. I can use it to access the building at work. I can use it to access the equipment here, but I'm also putting RFID readers in my house to experiment with, you know, the utility and convenience of having RFID, and to find out what some of the liabilities are, the risks, just to see realistically, is this technology something that's going to happen in the future. Well, as far as using the implant in my home, it's more for security-related issues. Obviously, I have a lot of voice technology in my house as well, Google Home and Alexa. It allows me to try out both of them. But what I'm looking at is trying to use the technology to be able to access areas that need to be secured. So, for example, if I have a safe that I want to be able to access easily, the garage, and any other type of thing that I wanted to not have to type in a keypad or any type of code.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things where, I don't own a gun because I would most likely hesitate to use it, and therefore the gun could put me into more danger than it would be to protect me. And that's just the type of person I am. However, most of my family owns guns, and, I think that an RFID reader would be great to prevent the gun to be used against you or stolen and used for a crime. The main issue is the reader would have to be very, very reliable. I have found some readers that are low power, specifically on the Tesla, take a little bit of time to read, and that could be an issue. However, the door access here at the Makerspace, it works instantly and every time, so if the reader was that good, then it'd probably be fine. Well, for one thing, it's the convenience. As far as I've driven to the Makerspace and then reached in my pocket for my key fob and realized I don't carry keys anymore, and the key fob's back at home, which is 30 to 40 minutes away. And so then I go to all the doors, pounding on them, hoping somebody will let me in, or trying to remember my passcode to get into the building. Usually that works. Now, when my hands are full, and I got to try to reach into my pocket and get out the key fob and fumble for the keys. Now all I have to do is put the hand while I'm holding on to something up against the reader, door unlocks, and you can do all the juggling like you normally do when you try to come in. That's nice. Also, when I walk out to the Tesla, many times I'm charging my phone or I'm downloading some new update and I'm leaving it in the house. So now I can run outside and all of a sudden I remember, I got to go back in and get my Tesla card because I can't use my phone. Now I use, the Tesla chip. And I'm using it surprisingly more than I thought I would. I'm really interested to see if it could possibly add to the security that's in the vehicle. The Tesla card is very, very difficult to clone versus like some of the other RFID chips, which are capable of cloning. There are other chip technologies that I actually purchased and I plan to implant in the future that do offer more levels of security. I'm a realist. I realize that, the RFID isn't the most secure way, but it is, one of the most convenient, secure ways to be able to give yourself access to things. Well, a lot of like the Tesla key fob is very expensive. Many things with the Tesla are expensive. So they did have to actually get a chip from Tesla. They had to remove it from the actual card. And then they created a biochip implant. So because of its novel approach, usually early adopters do pay a bit more. So it was $150 to get that chip. But for me, I do, people spend a lot of money on entertainment, and go to sports. I don't watch sports. I don't have a boat or an RV or a four-wheeler. Technology is kind of my hobby and my entertainment. So I wrote it off as kind of more of an entertainment fee to be able to experience the technology first and be able to understand the benefits and the and the risks. And there are risks involved with any type of body modification.
Yeah, I was just thinking that if the chip itself was $150,
Yes.
that's actually pretty comparable to a lot of keys for cars that you have to get done at the dealer because there's a chip in the key, so that you can't just physically copy the key.
No, you're absolutely.
$150, that's like.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of key fobs are very expensive, and it reminds me when someone broke into my van, and it was a 2007, and they tried to steal it. I had left it out on the street. They thought they could break into it, and they had destroyed the RFID reader, and so I purchased one myself. It still cost me $200 to get my existing key fobs to work with this RFID reader that I had to install myself. So yeah, anything dealing with vehicle security is kind of expensive. Well, the Tesla chip is actually locked down and very secure. You cannot write to it. So programming the Tesla chip is not capable. It's all proprietary, and it is 13.5 megahertz, similar to some of the NFC, near field communication that you might have on your Android phones. So you are able to read some information from your phone. but all the secure information seems to be pretty well locked down. Now, as far as programming the other two chips, the 125 kilohertz chip does have the ability to be read and written to. There is a small read writer that you can buy. One came with my kit that I had purchased, and it allows me to reprogram the chip if I would like to. The chip can also be cloned, so if you have a work access card, you can clone onto that chip. The other chip is actually a more modern chip, and it actually is designed to integrate with your phone, so you can actually program it with your Android phone. As far as where to get the chips, there are a lot of different suppliers that will supply you with the chip. However, I ran across this site called Dangerous Things, and they provided some of the equipment you would need to do it as well. They also had instructional videos, and I saw other people on their site do the implants. So I actually, even though it was probably a little more expensive, I purchased it from a site called Dangerous Things. And in there they have quite a few disclaimers because you are modifying your body and there is a risk. So the things that I learned this week, one thing is that the read distance of some of these RFID chips are not as far as like a access card. The access card can be held a half an inch or sometimes even a few inches away, mainly because the magnetic field decreases so quickly with distance. Actually can show you the formula a little later. But I got a little worried with the Tesla implant because with some swelling from the implantation, the chip stopped to work as well as it did when I first implanted it. And I had to find a specific place to actually read it until the swelling went down. The benefit of that is I now know right where the best place is to put the chip so it can read. But there is a risk that if the integrity of the biosafe coating, the implant that they actually sealed the chip in, if that fails, the chip will stop working. I got a little worried. I thought that had happened. However, I went and got a more powerful reader. It was able to read the chip. I went back out to the car and was able to find how to get the chip to read. So that was a bit scary. So as far as where to implant the chips, I actually implanted the small one here first, 2 millimeters by 14 millimeters. There were a lot of locations in this area that they recommend. It's outside of where you're gonna impact something, if you're gonna block, if you're gonna punch, anytime you're gonna get hurt, it's most likely gonna be in the fingers, the knuckles, this exposed area. So this is an area that doesn't get used much for being impacted. It's also an area where there isn't a lot of nerves or tendons or anything to be able to get in the way. So this is the classic position on where to install most RFID chips. The Tesla implant was a lot larger, and so some people have implanted it in their forearms, but when I did tests, it seemed like the thinner skin would be the best place to install it. So I chose a location that is outside of any of my knuckle movement because they don't want you to overflex the chip. And so it actually starts here and ends here. And this Band-Aid is covering over a very small incision that was used to install it. Trying to keep it closed, they say, for 2 weeks until it heals. What you want to do is reduce the chance of an infection, which is a very real risk. So where to plant the chips? Did a lot of research ahead of time to make sure I found the optimal place to implant them. This one was a lot easier. It was only 2 millimeters by 14 millimeters, and you used a small needle to inject it. This is the classic place to put it. It's in a location where you can't get injured. It's very, usually if you're going to impact something or hit something or something's going to hit or you're going to block, it's always going to be on like all the typical places. This area, normally you're not going to have to worry about a physical trauma. And it's a very soft, where there's not a lot of bone or anything in the area. This is the typical place to put a standard RFID chip. So some people with the Tesla implant will go like in the forearm or up above, someplace where there's a lot more surface area. but the skin is thicker, and as I found with doing some of the tests, the read distance for the Tesla chip is very, very short. We're talking less than 2 millimeters. So I ended up putting it where my skin was the thinnest and where I could actually put it up against the reader the most convenient method. You know, I have a lot more control over the position of the hand and the angle of the hand versus like with your arm. And I found that position of the chip with regard to the reader is actually very, very important. So while I was trying to figure out where the best place to put the chip was, I actually did some tests, oriented the chip to the different parts of the reader. And it's a lot like if you've been driving your motorcycle and you're trying to get those readers in the ground, the inductive sensors to be able to read your vehicle. You find that sometimes you have to go over the edge of the coil. I found that with this small coil that's on the chip, I had to do the same thing. So once I found where the chip had to be oriented, which side read the best, I decided to implant it right here in the very typical place where most RFID readers are, but it allows me to orient my hand in whatever fashion I need to. So if I want to go horizontal, vertical this way, or vertical that way, I have complete access in case I have to be a little more creative with getting the reader to read properly. I found that walking up to the door, grabbing the handle, and then just putting my hand like this on the reader, I can easily read it, and it picks up quickly, and I'm able to unlock the door. Now, at first, when I received the chip, it came in a small vial, and I did some testing inside the vial, and I could only intermittently get the chip to read. Found out that with the vial, it kept the chip about 4 millimeters away from the actual reader. That prevented it from being able to actually work, and I thought I had a faulty chip at first. So I then wrapped the chip in different layers of like an alcohol wipe, and then tried to keep it sterile. And I attempted to utilize the chip at multiple angles until I found the limits of what it could read.
Okay. Yeah, come on through.
Sorry.
Before I got the implant, I ended up doing a lot of research and watching videos online of how you insert different body implants. And so did you know, the person who was doing the implant for me. And there were plenty of videos showing multiple different implants. Recently, there was a kind of a famous implant, you know, about a month ago, where a girl had it implanted into her arm, and that kind of overwhelmed all of the videos. So now it pretty much shows, you know, implanting it here. If you have thicker skin, I would highly advise you not to put it there, because you probably won't be able to read. The other thing that I noticed was that it seemed like the easiest way to install it was with a needle that they use. It's called a 4-gauge needle. You use it to like put giant implants in your ear or do piercings. But it actually cuts kind of deep into your body and doesn't keep it up underneath the layer of skin. And as when we did the research, we found that, you know, pulling up, you know, the skin separates it from the fascia down below, and you just slide the insert underneath. And surprisingly, the experience of getting it inserted was not painful at all for me, mainly because I bought the pain management kit, which was a small needle that was used to numb the area where the insertion went. Where a lot of people who get the gauge needle, they just insert it, and it's a 1/4-inch needle. It looks like a straw with a sharpened edge. It's pretty vicious. Well, as far as, you know, being able to reduce the amount of pain for the insertion, some people will just use like 4% lidocaine that you can get at the counter at Walgreens, and that's what I used for this side, just to see how easy it would be. So I put a bit of lidocaine on the area, and it didn't hurt at all. After just several minutes of letting it sit there, and once it was inserted, I could feel like what felt like a light pinch, not painful, but where you could feel somebody pinching you, like trying to get your attention, and a little bit of a burning sensation when it first pierced the skin. Other than that, that's about all that I felt on the smaller implant with the needle. As far as the Tesla chip, as far as pain management, I was going to use the lidocaine because I was going to use the needle. We then changed our mind when we started doing testing with the chip and found out that we needed to keep it closer to the top of the skin. So it was going to create less trauma, less swelling, and get it right under the skin if we make a 1/4-inch incision and then make a pocket underneath the skin and then insert the chip. And so there I ordered a pain management, which was an actual injectable local anesthetic. Well, I've always liked the idea at some point in the future to be part of like the NeuroLace program, or to be able to get a math coprocessor chip, or to be able to interface with technology in a more intimate way. I got LASIK done as soon as it was able to improve my vision, so I got that done. Temporarily implanted a neodymium magnet in my skin so I could sense magnetic fields. And then I've been following RFID chips for quite some time to where one would be practical. Once the space started implementing a bunch of RFID chips here to be able to access equipment, and my Model 3, a chip became available, it was pretty much now's the time to try the technology out and see if it works up to what my expectations are. So there is a member of the Arkansas Makerspace, I think Little Rock, and Jason, when I told him I got my chip implanted on Sunday, he says, "Happy cyborg birthday." So I thought about it. I was like, oh, wow. So my first steps on my road to becoming a cyborg, I guess. It is neat to have technology underneath your skin where you cannot see it and where it can actually be practical and usable. I look forward to more advancements being available to the public in the future. Yeah, if anyone who wants to do some body modifications, I think the most important thing is to do your research and to have a sterile environment and have a good plan. Work with, if you don't know people or know someone in the medical industry who's willing to help, definitely reach out to, a body modification experts that are willing to do implants. Of the different things like piercings or like studs that people have, or even like tongue or lip piercings, once it goes under the skin and it's able to heal, that's probably one of the safer ones, because you're now able to seal back up the skin for sanitary purposes. Where people who have protrusions through the skin, it's a constant trouble, as far as risk of infection.
Point to where the implant is,
And
the Tesla.
so the Tesla implant, and you might even be able to see it if I move it a little bit. So the implant is right under the skin right here. It's about that long. I don't know if you can see it moving.
And you still got a Band-Aid because you just did this a week ago, but that'll just scar over and you'll never notice it, right?
Right, and to be honest, I learned a long time ago about using cyanoacrylate or cyanoacrylate glue and using it on either side of the wound and closing it up, that you can prevent scars. When doctors have given me stitches in the past, it's left really bad scars. The scars that I have from when I've repaired myself using cyanoacrylate glue and just holding the skin together, you can't even see the scars anymore. So that's what I'm going to be doing. That's what I'm doing, attempting to do here, is to minimize the scarring.
So you got super glued shut after getting the implant?
Not necessarily super gluing the cut itself, but where the sutures usually have to be sewn through the skin like you're darning a sock, that does so much damage and is so traumatic. I actually glue a sterile string on either side, on the outside of the body, on either side of the wound, to hold the wound closed while it's healing. And that seems to make it with the least amount of scarring. See that?
Yeah.
It goes in like 1.5 inches. And then, oops. and then once he goes to insert the chip, he just slides it in. And then that's the insertion of the chip. Now, the funny thing about that is that when I had the chip installed, the pain was, I could feel like trauma was happening to me while I was having the chip installed. Sometimes, like when you twist your ankle and then the endorphins kick in, the pain goes away, but you feel a little sick to your stomach, like you got hurt. So I was feeling this little sickness, like I know I got hurt. And ironically, while this was going on, my wife had just got done making chili, and I was very hungry. I wasn't bothered at all by the blood or anything else. So as soon as we were done and we put the Band-Aid on it and everything, I ran over and got that bowl of chili, and I took a bite of it, and it was hot. I burned my mouth. It had to have been 10 times worse than the whole implant procedure.
Oh, man. Wow, and so you just got it in, and you can flex your hand, and
Yeah, the bleeding stopped pretty quickly. It's like your hand seems to always be used to getting injured, so the bleeding seems to stop on your hand very, very quickly. And I think they call it hemostasis pretty quickly. All right. So as far as being able to unlock the space, I just have to put my hand over top of it. There's my name and when my renewal date is, and lets me into the building. All right, so to unlock my car, I got to remember which chip to do it. It's the Tesla one. So I put it right here. It unlocks the door, and it also allows me to drive the vehicle. One of the things versus unlocking it with the phone, with the RFID or your card, you always have to remember to relock the vehicle. If you don't lock the vehicle, somebody can take it. And as you notice, that's actually one of the things where position is extremely important with the chip. Oh, and yeah, this is actually where sometimes this can happen.
see, like right now, it sounds like just walking away with your phone app would be better.
Exactly. So walking away with your phone is actually way more convenient. So 99% of the time, I just use the phone. However, this access allows me to use the car or get access to the car if my phone isn't available at the time. Many times it could be in the charger, or it could be not functioning properly. I even had one moment where I bought a new phone and I was at the mall, and when I went to go get in my car, it wouldn't let me into the car because I didn't have the key or the phone. Actually ended up having to log in remotely using the username and password from somebody else's device. To lock it.
Use your hand and lock them like this.
So one of the really neat things that Dan put in the space was he made it so that most of the tools can be used with your key fob or your passcode and your PIN number. And so what I use is I usually use my dongle, but if my dongle's in my bag or in my car, or I left it at home, then I always got to remember my number, and actually I don't even know my number. So now I can actually just use my RFID implant to be able to utilize the tool. So now I can actually use the tool, and then when I'm done with the tool, I go up and I swipe it, and then I can put it right back into the location that it goes. And then that's mainly so that if I am still using the tool or I left the tool somewhere, they can ask the last person to use it, hey, you know where you left the tool? Or if the tool isn't working, I can tell them, hey, you were the one, I was using it and it just did this. And then the space can have more information to know how to fix it. Okay, all set to use.
So now
No one else can use
we're
it
locked out. A guest can't come and use the machine.
and injure themselves.
Nobody can hurt themselves. You have to be a member. You have to be logged in, and keeps everybody safe and keeps track of who uses what piece of equipment.
And I think the main use of it was to just track that if something broke and people come in and they don't know what was broken or how, they can go back to the log and then ask that member what exactly happened. And you know, even though we don't usually make the member pay for it, we do ask that they help fix it and that they learn how to use the equipment properly. So it's more about being able to have information, because the worst thing is to come in and have a tool broken and have no idea of how it got broken.